Hello, 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 and welcome to the Mystic Nerd Squad podcast. I'm Kelly Meyerson, your host. I'm here to record this podcast. I've had a little bit of a hiatus, which I was just sharing with my guest just prior to coming on. As a manifesting generator, taking a break and rest has become something that's sort of a key factor to my health and well-being. And so taking a big rest and a little bit of time, even from those things that I do find a lot of joy in, was such a good thing for me. So I want to just start by saying tonight we're going to be talking about parenting with human design. And I just have to tell you a little bit about my guest, Aypril Porter. She is on a mission to help her readers and clients live deep, rich, and authentic lives by giving themselves permission to live according to their human design. A recovering, self-sabotaging, people-pleasing rebel mama, Aypril learned the hard way that not living an authentic life is a fast track to burnout, bitterness, and dissatisfaction. Aypril, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I just want to tell you all that Aypril has written a book. It's called Parenting the Child You Have, Reimagining the Parent-Child Relationship Through the Lens of Human Design. And I'm just going to put it up here because I'm a digital reader. So I'm putting it on the screen if you're watching the video. If you're not, in the show notes, we'll have all the ways that you can get this book, because as Aypril starts to talk today, you're going to want this book in your hands or on your digital reader, if the case is that you're a digital reader like me. So, Aypril, welcome, and tell us a little bit about, for those listeners who are new to human design, haven't heard about it before, what is human design and how is it that you came to be so invested in it?
Yeah. So human design is a tool. It's a blend of several ancient and modern wisdoms. So the Kabbalah, the I Ching, the chakra system, astrology, quantum physics, it's a little bit of all of them overlaid into this map that tells you more about the energy blueprint that you're here to experience and live with in this lifetime. And it shows us so much about the why of the way that we behave, right? So we have these things that happen to us and we wonder, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? What is the purpose of it? What does it mean? And so many times I can go back to the chart and go, well, this is in the chart. It manifests differently for each person, but it explains, it gives us a language around it so that what we're going through doesn't have to feel like it's pointless.
Yeah. And so how is it that you came to find human design? Because I love you called yourself a recovering people pleaser. You're in good company there, rebel mama. I love that. So where did human design come into your life?
So I was actually working as a nutritional therapy practitioner and deeply in the health and nutrition world. And an email came across my desk at a center that I was working in. And I was like, what is human design? Like, are we genetically modifying people now? What is happening? I was like genuinely curious and kind of a little upset. And then I read a little bit further and I was like, oh, okay. So it's like personality typing and astrology kind of stuff. Okay. Which was like a kryptonite for me, right? I'm like, tell me more. Tell me more. I need to know. So I ran my chart, found out I was a projector. And at first I was like, oh, cool. It's like one of the rarer types, right? Because I want to be the rare type. And then once I realized like, oh, I have to wait for the invitation, I was like, oh, no, this can't be right. I do things. I do lots of things. That's how I ended up in burnout, but I do things. And it's once I kind of sat with that for a little bit, it started to explain why I ended up in burnout and some of the things I was going through. And so then at some point it was like, okay, I need to pull my kids' charts and my family and see what's going on. I found out that my kids and my mom are all projectors as well. My husband's a manifester. So it just added like another element to understanding why my kids are so similar and so different. They're 2 years apart, but they're so wildly different and similar in so many ways. And it helped me to parent them in a way that I could understand what each child needed. And I got out of this feeling of like, oh, I have to be equal. Like everything has to be equal. I have to do this for this one and I have to do the same for the other. And it was really freeing to realize that it could be different. I could create something new.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think, for me, is for myself in my own journey, coming across human design, like you, I was like, tell me everything you know about human design. And I'm a 1-3, so I'm obsessed with researching things. So I'm still obsessed with researching human design. I'm like, what else can I like jump down the rabbit hole for? And I think the first thing I did, same thing, got my chart. And then I was like, oh, well, so if this is me, I'm like, who else's chart can I pull? And I was asking all my friends, when's your birthday? When were you born? What time were you born? And so, came to find out that my best friend is a projector, and we're like very different, but like our differences kind of bond us together and we work so well together. And I realized that my husband and my son are both generators. And there were so many answers to me, like on the onset of why we had conflict in our home. Because as a manifesting generator, I'm like flipping around the house from one thing to the next, getting things done. Like it's hard to pin me down, and didn't know the beauty of informing. And it made a lot of sense as to why we're all so driven to be moving and need a lot of doing in our day in order to be able to lay down and go to bed at night, and why my husband and my son like to roughhouse before bedtime. And I'm like, it's bedtime. We shouldn't be roughhousing. But yeah, so very similar to you. I was like, I need to know how the people around me operate because it's so interesting. So how did you go from, just the curiosity and understanding your kids' charts to being like, there's got to be a bigger piece to this for all parents?
I think it just kind of evolved. I spent years dancing in and out of it. Like, I'm going to go back and take a class. And then I would walk away and I'd be like, I don't understand this. I'm so frustrated. Like, why can't I just get it? And it was like mentally I could understand it, but then bringing it into my life was like, this isn't working. And it was because I was so conditioned that I was having such a hard time changing those patterns. So seeing them is one thing, actually changing them is another. And I felt like there's got to be an easier way to implement this. I don't need to go through 4,000 trainings and gather every ounce of information. It's more about what can I do with it to bring it into my life. And so I started talking to other parents, because again, running everybody's charts, like, what's your birth date? Where were you born? just curious,
Just curious.
And then you start to notice the traits about people and how they show up in the chart. And I started talking to friends who have kids and were dealing with different things. And as they would come up, we would look at the chart and we could trace these things back to the chart and look at, well, how could you do things a little differently and see if the outcome changes? And these things were working. And it was amazing to watch. And I was like, why are all people not given this at birth?
Totally.
Right? Like, we would be so much better off if we just had this guidebook from birth. And so I started looking and nothing like it existed. And actually what inspired me to write the book was a friend had a baby. And I pulled her chart and saw all these unique features about her and was really excited telling the parents about her. And the parents were already into human design anyway, but we got excited about it. And I came home and I said I was going to put together a little something for her about her child. And I started writing. And then I realized there's like 3,000 words and 6,000 words. It just kept like growing. And I was like, but I haven't even told you everything I need to tell you. And so it just turned into a book.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the book. I love it so much because, one, I felt your passion as a parent and this sense of what are we leaving for future generations? What is the legacy that we intend to do together? And I think that's one of the things that gets me very excited about the human design world, that it's about really making this a better place for everybody to live and people getting the best out of their lives and being able to be who they are uniquely without having to compromise or to fall into conditioning, that individual kind of a sense, really excited me about the book. And then it was just so easy for me to go through and say, okay, let me tease out some of these things. It's such a beautiful way that you've put it together. You go through the types of design, so manifestors, reflectors, projectors, and generators. But what I really loved was when towards the end of each of those sections, when you're talking about those different types, you talked about the different parenting types and what might be some of the issues and challenges or things that you could use to sort of help guide those relationship. That got me really excited.
Yeah. I mean, that was important to me because how do we talk about how our children need to be parented differently without talking about how we need to parent differently? And how we need to look at our own stories and what we were conditioned by from our parents. We're not doing this in isolation. It's a whole microcosm that's changing here. Like everything shifts. And when we shift those things, our relationships with our parents change, and our kids' relationships with their future kids are going to be different because of it. So it's like this ripple effect that's happening in all directions. And we have to look at all the pieces together.
Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit, and I want to talk about emotional dynamics.
Okay.
Tell me what this means to you and why it's such a vital piece of the puzzle.
I think that the emotional dynamic is so unique in human design from the way that we typically look at emotions in our world and our society. In the society that we live in, it feels like what we hear is, oh, you're sad? Why? Let's find out why. Let's track it back to what made you sad. And then let's eradicate that, because sad is not good. Angry is not good. Bitter isn't good. All of these not self emotions that we know exist in the human design world that tell us when we're off our path, they're really just signals for us. But in our world, it's like all of these things are the thing that we're trying to banish. And so human design comes in and says, wait a minute. All these emotions have a purpose. We just need to understand how we experience them. And so we know that some people are emotionally defined. They have an emotional wave that they emit into the world 24 hours a day. They can't stop it. They can't really change it. It's just there. And they move through this, and they rise and they fall, and life goes on. And then we have people who are emotionally open or undefined who are absorbing all of those emotional waves. They also feel their own things, but they feel in response rather than just moving through this wave all day long. So understanding it through this new lens gives us the ability to step back and say, okay, I don't have to identify with what caused this. Emotions just exist.
I'm obsessed with this, and I happen to be emotionally defined. And so I had always been concerned about, having like emotional lows and emotional highs and just feeling like almost like I had no control over my emotions, and concerns like, is there something wrong with me? And learning more about human design, I realized like I'm just a very emotional being. And I could go, like you said, in a wave. Like I could go from feeling incredible sadness to like complete euphoria within the course of a day. And it used to be like defining my day by like the worst of those emotions, the worst in quotes. And so learning about human design, and like you're saying, that your emotions are just an indicator. It's not a good or bad thing. And I'm sure, and you can say if you feel differently, but growing up as a young girl, being emotionally defined, having emotions was very inconvenient for a lot of people. And I learned to sort of put a cap on that, because I realized, being very sensitive to everybody else around me, that people were uncomfortable by my emotions.
Yeah. I had a similar experience because I have that 3740, which is the ratcheting wave. And I could go from like just getting along okay, but feeling the frustration or irritation, and then something like one little thing putting me over the edge, and then having this explosion, but then having such relief after it, right? Like, oh, we cleared the air. That's good. But I noticed that the people around me were not feeling that way. It was like, well, why can't we play together now? Like it's all better.
I'm fine.
Right? And so like at some point you realize, oh, people don't like that. I can't do that. So you start to like hold it in or try not to show that emotion. And I think the same thing happens with like, being vulnerable in a way too. And so some of those emotions that make you maybe cry, we start to realize, ooh, people aren't comfortable with that either. So I have to hold it in. I have to rein this in. And I don't think that I cried as an adult in front of people for years because it just made people uncomfortable. So I took that as like a badge of honor, like, oh, I don't cry. Like, I don't cry at this movie. It's really sad or anything. But it really wasn't. It was just me suppressing it and holding on to it so tightly.
Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that. Like, I would cry at Hallmark commercials. Like, if somebody's having emotion or talking about their emotion, I'm feeling it, and it's my emotion too. And it's so funny because, my husband would look at me and be like, what is going on right now? Why are you crying? I feel like it's a gift. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a reflexive crier. That's just what I do, and it's funny because I had friends, back in my college days that we would just say like, we're like, sympathetic criers. If other people are crying, we're here to cry with you and we support you. And I think I sort of internalized it as a gift, but always just sort of like, this is just fascinating to me that this is how I respond to things when other people would just be able to sit there and not be affected at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting what our natural tendencies are and then what our conditioned tendencies are.
Yeah. And I feel that conditioning as like a tightening in my heart space when I'm, suppressing emotions. And I think over the years, all the times that I sort of suppressed how I was really feeling and emotions I was really feeling, like I'd have bottlenecks and just like explode and be yelling and very angry when I suppressed so frequently the emotions and feel it in my body.
Yeah. And our bodies can only hold that for so long before it starts to manifest as some illness or disorder in a lot of times.
So how do we bring that to our children? Because I know this is such an easy conversation to have about children and their tantrums. And, I know in the beginning of my parenting journey, if my son was really upset about something, it would be all about calming him down and stopping, like you said, that overwhelming emotion. And I could realize like it was affecting my emotional system. I was feeling out of control and overwhelmed by it. And so when I started to understand my own system, then I started to look at his emotions as like, well, he has every right, if he's feeling angry, to allow his anger to come through. And I started following some different voices out there. People like, have you heard of Janet Lansbury? Like different voices out there for children being allowed to experience their emotions and being accepted as a whole human being in person. And not, you're just a kid, you don't understand, but like from a baby, like you have every right to feel everything that you feel and experience everything you experience without somebody telling you it's inconvenient for them.
Right. We do. We deny that experience from the very beginning. A child falls and gets hurt. Oh, stop crying. You're fine. But there's pain. And whether it's physical or emotional or any other pain, when we teach them that that's not real or that's not okay, then they suppress it too. So I think one of the biggest things for me is in doing like family readings with people for human design is to look at that emotional dynamic. Who in the family is emitting this emotional wave and who has the receptivity to these emotional waves? And then also taking it a step further and seeing who has half of these channels and who has the other half, so that when these two people come together, it creates a temporary wave. Looking at how do we manage that? How do we learn to take the time out. So, two people who are emotionally undefined coming together can create a temporary wave. And those two people can just ping pong that energy, that emotion back and forth until somebody decides, okay, I'm taking the ball out of the air. This ping pong is done. And then they walk away. And, learning that as a technique rather than like, we have to fix this, we have to solve it. Let's resolve it right now, because we just perpetuate that. We just keep sending it back and forth. So I think learning, what are the dynamics in your family and how do you manage first your own feelings? How do you let your child have their feelings? And being able to sit with that child, I think, is really important and say, wow, I see that you're having a feeling right now. It's really big. I can see that it is really big. And when we can sit there and say, it doesn't scare me. Your emotions don't scare me. I am here for it. And I will sit here with you as you ride through this wave and it'll be okay. We let them know that it's okay to feel all those things and that it will pass.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, what do you do if you have a family and everybody is emotionally defined and, like you say, the energy just can really ping pong between each other? How do you, let's say you're the one person who can sort of see it and be like, oh my gosh, I see what's happening right now. How do you help everyone else sort of stop it from becoming a negative situation and everybody getting super frustrated with each other?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. One is when I see families that everybody has emotional definition, they don't take it as, they don't ping pong it quite the same way as if there's a family with one undefined or more undefined people in it. Because they're used to feeling through a wave of their own, they may be in a different wave, but because they feel it, it's like, oh, I recognize that in you. You're feeling sad, you're feeling happy, you're feeling this or that. And it's like, oh, you're doing your thing. And so there's a more of an ability to step back and say, that's theirs, this is mine. But I think the confusion comes in when that undefined person is like, ooh, all of this is mine. It feels like a lot, right? Like I'm feeling all of it from everyone. And so that can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I can, as much as I know my emotional wave can affect other people, I can be affected and feel other people's emotions. And it's taken a long time to be able to be like, whoa, I don't need to get carried away by that. That's not mine. That's somebody else's. And be a little more grounded and centered in myself to be available to hold space for that person.
Yes. So I think to answer the second part of your question is looking at what do each of the people and their waves need. Each wave has a different need. And so understanding what that is and then teaching that child or that person in the family, this is how your emotions, I've noticed, go. And look, what things make it feel better? And, like, what is the need that's not being met? How are you not speaking up for yourself? What did you really want in that situation? So like with the tribal wave, which is about need, if we're not clearly communicating our needs and our boundaries, that's going to get walked all over and we're going to ratchet up in that wave a lot faster. We're going to have that explosion. We're going to have the frustration or whatever it erupts from it. But if we can teach our kids like, oh, like this is something that I can do to get my needs met so that I don't have to have that explosion, it can change everything.
Yeah, that sounds like a very familiar experience for me. The the boundary setting and understanding that and that tribal wave, I think, is very meaningful to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and understanding like with the tribal wave, touch can bring it down. So just like, would you like a hug? That can be a huge thing to just bring that wave down a couple notches so that it doesn't have to explode.
Always, I'll take a hug. Absolutely. Always. Yeah. Wow. I think that's so fascinating. I'm really curious, and I think, I have a lot of generators in my life, but for children who are, some of the more, rare types, the reflector, the projector, the manifestor, what are some of the things to look out for and to really consider with them as children?
As far as emotions or?
I think as far as emotions, yeah, that would be great.
That's kind of a difficult one to answer because there's so many variations of
Mm-hmm.
those charts that, you may have an emotional manifestor, and that's going to be a whole different presentation than, a uh, a splenic manifestor, for example. There's just a whole different feeling to it. So a manifestor has that inner creative drive that really like comes forth, and there's a need to like express it, to
Mm-hmm.
create, to do
Mm-hmm.
something. And if you have an emotional definition on top of that, what wave is it in? Is it ratcheting up? And if it doesn't get met, then there's going to be a big explosion. And with a manifestor who has a bigger aura that's impacting, that could feel really intense.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can have, a manifestor without that wave. There's still going to be that intensity. There's still going to be that impact that they create, but it has a different feeling. There's a different quality to it. So I think understanding first if your child is emotionally defined or undefined, that's going to give you a different lens to look through. Sometimes the kids who are emotionally undefined are the most emotionally appearing children in the room. And so they often get blamed for being too emotional, for being too reactive. And really, they just aren't meant to hold all of this emotion in their body. And so it's trying to come back out, whether it's through tantrums or yelling or, whatever that looks like. It just is very expressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it really makes me curious about, how many kids out there that we sort of end up labeling as, overly emotional, too sensitive, maybe there's something diagnostically wrong with them, who are really just playing out the parts of their design. It just makes me curious. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's multiple layers to that, right? So human
Mm.
design doesn't answer everything, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
piece. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
a it's a lens to look through and say, these other things weren't working. What else is possible? Well, let's look at it from human design and see what else we can bring in based on the tools that we have here. So
Yeah.
it's not the end all be all. It's just a tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. So, if a parent were listening to this and they're completely fresh new to human design, but a lot of this is resonating with them for themselves and for their own families, what would be a good first step for them?
Um, well, if they know their designs already, I would say that the first thing that I typically tell parents is, especially if you have more than one child and you're new to human design, it feels like a lot. Look at who has a defined sacral center and who does not.
Mm.
Who needs to move their body? Those sacral energy beings need to move their bodies to move that energy out, to be able to sit and focus in school, to be able to sleep well at night, because that's like their little rechargeable battery. Every night it just gets recharged. And then the non-sacral beings, they need more downtime. So we may have one, projector or reflector, or even a manifestor in a family of generators, and we wonder, why does this child not want to do sports or participate like the others? And sometimes there's, amplification of that, and they look like the busiest person in the house too. But a lot of times I see there's one child who just wants to read all the time or just wants quiet time, and we'll look at charts and we'll notice that this is the child that doesn't have the defined sacral, and so they're just working with a different energy type. So
Mm-hmm.
understanding that, I think, is probably the biggest thing, because you're also looking at, when you have this element of defined sacral children, we need to ask them yes no questions, this or that questions. Make it
Mm-hmm.
a simple this or that kind of scenario so that their sacral can respond. Whereas non-defined sacrals really need open-ended questions. We need to talk. We need to like hear it all come out of our mouths and figure out what's there, because we don't know until we start talking about it a lot of times.
Yeah. I often joke with my husband, my favorite game is what would you like for dinner? And what he wants me to do is make suggestions to which he will say yes or no.
Mhm.
And I'm realizing it probably works for him. But it's really funny because I'd sort of figured out that yes no questions work for my son. Like, I can't say, what did you do today at school? But did you have a good day at school? Yes. Did you do anything special? Yes. Do you want to tell me about that special thing that you did? No. Okay, great.
Yeah, you ask the sacral child, like, what did you do today, or what do you want for dinner, and they go,
I,
Uh,
nothing's coming.
I don't know. Yeah. It's like overwhelming their system.
Yeah.
And so it
And
looks like they're not paying attention or not answering you, but they're really just overwhelmed.
yeah, and it's so fascinating to me because I realize that this is a big piece of things for me. Like when people come to me and ask me questions and it's not a yes no question, I've got a lot on my mind. I'm like, I don't even have words to put together, you
Mhm.
know? But if you can change it to yes no questions, do you have space in your schedule to take something new? Yes. Would you be interested in this? No. How about this? Yes. You know, it's really fascinating to me. And it just, I think that's really good advice to understand that sacral piece. And the piece about needing to move your body, one of my huge passions is sleep. And I work in schools with a lot of kids with special needs, and I recognize so many of them have these, movement overflows because they don't really get all of the movement that they need in the day to be
Yeah.
able to then be able to sit still, pay attention, engage in learning. And so it's been really cool for me. My background is in occupational therapy and sensory processing. So I've always been teaching my kiddos about how to self regulate,
Mhm.
and how to be ready. We talk about being ready to learn, feeling calm, feeling present, feeling focused, and what are the tools that we need. And it used to be more about like, how do we get the kids to be compliant? And now I feel like it's shifted so much more into some emotional intelligence and like, how am I right now? What's going on with me right now? And not just I can't sit still and focus, but what's underlying that? I need something. I need to move. I am hungry. I'm thirsty. I didn't sleep well. I feel tired. And tuning it back into their bodies and understanding how their bodies work. And really, I think, same like you said, like taking that stigma away from having emotions and it's just information. It's
Mhm.
not good or bad. There are helpful and unhelpful ways of acting on our emotions. But yeah, I think that has been a really cool piece that I can pull into the work that I do with kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how things are shifting, and I see human design reaching further and further. And as it does, I see people like Ellen Hefty creating programs to teach teachers how to teach children based on their design and have these conversations with parents. And that's really exciting too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, in my experience, the general, like, typical school is quite ready to jump into that.
Yeah.
But I'm finding like it's giving me more tools to be a little more interested in discovering how children operate best.
Mhm.
And even if I don't have all the information, I can figure out, are they better if I give them two choices? Or, like you said, this or that, yes or no? Or do they really want to sort of explore all the pieces of it? So I think those pieces can be really helpful, even if you don't have all the information, to sort of run the experiment and see what works.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a pretty simple thing, either open-ended questions or, closed yes, no kind of questions. And you learn pretty quickly, like, oh, well, 70% of the population is a generator type. So my chances of having the yes, no question work, I should probably start with that. And if that doesn't work, then I go to the open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then also looking at bringing in that emotional piece. Do you have a child who just takes a long time to make a decision? That might be completely correct for them. Emotional definition needs time, and often they need
Mm-hmm.
to sleep on it if it's a big decision or even longer. And so giving them that space, and then if you do know that they are emotionally defined, asking them, how do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
Not just what do you think, but how do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to tell you a lot.
Yeah. It's such a cool thing because I've always been a feeler. And for years, and I have an open head and an open ajna, and there's not even any like connection to the rest of myself. Like it's just open up there. So there's always so much stuff. So like the years that I spent trying to think never ever was helpful for me. But now that I'm so much more tuned into how things feel and my emotional wave and decision making and waiting, you know, I never realized like that was a thing. I was always ready to be like, all right, I'm jumping in. I'm just going to say yes, you know, a reflexive yes, because I knew that's what most people wanted to hear versus I need to think about that, you know?
Yeah.
But now it's more like I need to feel about that. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I need some time. And I think practicing those statements. And I think about the times, like even with kids that were like, do you want to go do blah, blah, blah? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know. And you're like, oh, I don't have to pressure for an answer, you know, because some, like you said, that wave for some people is that 24 hours or longer, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger the decision, the longer the wait.
Yeah. And
So,
it's interesting because I've been doing some more reading about this. And, you know, I'm definitely like, you can see there's the yeses and the nos are very apparent for me. But now I'm realizing that I also have like like a maybe that comes out. And I'm
mhm,
like, oh, that's my reminder and cue to myself. Take the time, wait. You don't have
mhm.
to jump right in with 2 feet right away. You can give it some time to percolate. Yeah.
It's interesting too because, you have a defined sacral. I do not. I'm emotionally defined and I have a defined head and ajna. So there's a lot happening up here all the time too, and it's connected
Yeah.
to my throat. So given the invitation and opportunity, a lot can come out. But also I used to find myself saying, I think, and I do think. When invited, I can share that. But when I'm making decisions for myself, I really have to get into how do I feel?
Mm.
And so that was a big shift for me, was to go from, I think that this, because you start to go down all these paths of, well, pro cons, they're going to be unhappy or they're going to be happy. And this is good for this person or not for that. And so that the human design authority brings us back to our own internal power. And so when we
Mm.
can teach kids that from the beginning, like stay
Mm-hmm.
connected to that power of what's true and right for you, that is a powerful thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. So, tell me a little bit about some of the things you have going on right now and some of the ways that people can connect with you. And absolutely, everybody wants to get this book because, you know, I'm sure everybody's like, wait, now I need to I need to figure out how to run my chart. I need to be able to put my charts and look at them together.
Yeah. So charts are easy. You can run them free. There's several websites. There's myhumandesign.com, there's geneticmatrix.com, and some others out there. And then, taking that and printing it out and just looking at them for a while sometimes is part of the process to just see how different and how similar your charts are. Even if you don't understand what it all means yet, you're just looking at it and taking it in. That's starting something changing within you. And then, read the book or listen to the podcasts or, take in information in the way that feels good to you. If you're
Mm.
emotionally defined, does it feel good? Do you resonate with it? If not, like, does your sacral respond to it? Is it a yes? Or are you like, no, not this one? Find what works, because not everybody's going to resonate with the same information.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as what I'm doing, I am currently offering various different human design readings, but a lot of what I do is family readings or individual readings for kids. So a lot of times what will happen is parents will have a child who is just really struggling, or they're struggling with communicating, connecting with them, and that will bring them in. But we'll end up doing a family reading because, we can't just look at the one child. They're operating in this whole family unit. And so we have to look at all those pieces. So that's what I'm doing mostly right now. I do have a parenting class that's available. It's a self-paced class, and one on emotions actually as well.
Mm. Oh, I love all of that. And I'm just thinking this is such a special and empowering way to, you know, connect with your children and to kind of work through some of those challenges and dynamics. And I can just speak for myself, you know, my husband is not into any of this stuff, but like just for me understanding myself and putting into place some of the things that I know really work for me and just sort of noticing and saying it in a very simple, easy way. Wow, I noticed that when I do X, it seems to work much better for you. What do you think about that? You know, has been really empowering. So I think even if you're the only person who's doing it and you can't do a whole family, I think it's such a tremendous exercise to sort of understand the way in which people might work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it gives us a lot more compassion for the other person. You know, sometimes we are struggling with somebody in our life, not necessarily our child, maybe a spouse, maybe a parent, maybe somebody else in our family or a friend. And understanding the energy that they're bringing to us and how our energies connect or, you know, have challenges there really helps us to have more compassion for what they're going through and not to take it so personally.
Mm-hmm.
And even in parenting, like how much do we take parenting so personally? It's like, I'm not doing my job if my child is not thriving in all these crazy ways. Like I have 100,000 ways that they have to be thriving in. And so when we hit that point, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. This is just who they're designed to be and it's different than me. And I can allow them that. And then there's less struggle. And then we're all winning.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, exactly. I think that's so great. I think the compassion and I think the self-compassion too. You know, I think it's a great way to sort of look at yourself and as a child, even some of the struggles and the things that you had difficulty with, and to see, you know, in your chart, the areas that may have sort of created that and the conditioning that sort of came in and had a part to play. And to realize, I mean, you feel less, at least I could say for myself, I feel less imperfect as a parent and that I've done a really good job. And I look at my parents and I look at the circumstances and what they were dealing with. I'm like, oh, I can have so much more compassion for them and the decisions that they made. And in that way, I think it really does offer such a beautiful time to, you know, shift the way that we're operating in the world in general as a whole, you know, tribe, community, planet. You know, there's so many potentials for this to improve everybody's lives.
Yeah. It's really like the pattern interrupt, right? Like it's the thing that stops us from just repeating the same cycle over and over again. We see it differently. We do things differently. Can't unsee it once you've seen it.
No. And I think that very often when I see the way my husband and I are parenting and, you know, changing some of the ways that we felt didn't work for us as children and changing how we interact with our son. And I'm really present to like, wow, what is this going to look like for him when he's a parent and he has children? And like, as the generations go down, like the amount of healing potential is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Aypril, thank you for nerding out with me on this topic. As you can tell, it's one of my favorites. And I appreciate your ability to share what you've put together here. And it really is such a beautiful guide for families. I really encourage everybody to get the book, share it with a friend. What a great baby shower gift. I'm going to remember that next time I have a baby shower. And connect with Aypril. And thank you so much for being here. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Take care, everybody. Bye.